Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
All right, so today we're going to talk about James Mangold's new film, Ford v Ferrari. We had a whole preamble to this podcast, wondering where the S went. Used to be, in the cinematic gold of the past, example, Ballistic X versus Sever. The title was X and then VS period Sever. But now all the cool kids are doing just a V, like a lowercase V, to notate verses. So I guess that's what James Mangold decided to do with his film. It's a movie that is about racing. It's about relationships. It's about big business. It's about friendship. And it stars Matt Damon and Christian Bale. It's in the 60s, and Ford tries to beat Ferrari at Le Mans, which is a race that I didn't really know about. Did you know anything about Le Mans before this movie?
Not really, no. I mean, yes and no. I mean, if somebody had said, what is this? I would have been able to say, I think it's a race, but sports go in one ear and right out the other until I watch a movie about them. And then it's stuck forever. So, no.
Yeah, it's I wanted to see it just because I saw the trailer. I love Matt Damon and Christian Bale and seeing them in the movie. Is this the first time they've been in a movie together? I think that it is. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of cool. Just having them. It's in some ways it's a somewhat of a two-hander, but there are other characters that are in there. We've got the playwright Tracy Letts, who plays Henry Ford II, and Noah Jupe plays Christian Bale's son. And I just realized today that he is Shia LaBeouf as a young kid in Honey Boy.
I wish that I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago how I've been having this love affair with certain actors. There's a show on TV called Pose, and it stars Emmy Award winner Billy Porter, and I've been obsessed with him. And there's another actor, oh my gosh, I can't remember their name right now. I'm going to look it up because they are so impressive to me. And Noah Jupe has been on my radar for such a long time. I mean, A Quiet Place, I just saw Wonder, and I was like, this kid's in my soul, and I don't even know his name. And then after seeing Wonder, Julia Roberts, Jacob Tremblay, and he plays his little best friend, and he's a standout. And then I realized he's playing Shia LaBeouf as a kid in Honey Boy, and I was like, I'm in. And both of them were just nominated for Independent Spirit Award nominations. Don't quote me on that. They've just been nominated for some kind of awards. So when his name came up in the credits, or when I realized he was in this movie, Ford v Ferrari, I was like, oh yeah, I love this kid. Good for him. Like, he's going to go far because he's already put in masterful performances. I just watched A Quiet Place again 2 weeks ago, and he is really a standout in that. He really is. So sorry, I didn't mean to stop you in mid-sentence, but I'm overly excited about certain actors, and I've been meaning to say, hey, we need to do a podcast about actors where we're just how we don't notice them until we notice them. If that makes sense. That doesn't make any sense.
No,
but you know what I'm talking about.
I get that. Yeah. And you are correct. He was nominated for, he was nominated for supporting male actor in the Indie Spirit Awards. And so was Shia LaBeouf, which I guess means that there's no lead, or they're doing Lucas Hedges as the lead. I don't understand that, but it's
okay. Let me interrupt you. The actor that I was talking about is India Moore, and they go by the pronoun them and they, so I'll respect that. They are in that show Pose, and they're just standouts, and they do something to my soul, and they forever sit there. And it's the same with Noah Jupe. He's just Queen and Slim. Have you seen the trailer for that?
Yeah.
Okay. India Moore is in that. Okay. And there's just something about them that it's this intangible quality of getting those moment to moments right. You remember how I was telling you, as an actor, having these big monologues or having this big emotional scene seems to come easier to me than just saying, hey, how are you? And then when you have to imitate life, when you just go, what? Or who? With these small little one lines that you say every day of your life, that's what I consider moment to moment work. That's hard for me. So when I see somebody do it with such realistic naturalism, I'm blown away by him. And India Moore, Billy Porter from Pose, the whole cast is incredible. But Noah Jupe, that little guy he has something. So anyway, back to the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, I think that, and I know this movie has a bunch of stars in it, but I do think that the supporting actors in this film are definitely worth speaking about. And I think we should talk about them beforehand. I felt like every time that Christian Bale's wife, in the movie, it's Molly is her character's name, but the actor that played Molly, her name is Catriona Balfe, and she's Irish, but I think she's got like a Birmingham accent, so she's playing a British character, but she's kind of like, I don't know, she just like did it for me, I guess. She's very magnetic, and her character in general is someone who's a enabling character, but in a good way. Like, you can tell that she really loves her husband and that she wants to support him in any way that she can, and that she gets joy out of seeing his joy in racing. And you can tell that their relationship is just an awesome and amazing relationship. And she's great. She's sexy, and she is a fully formed character, I believe. And she has her own opinions, and she has her own beliefs and her own character traits. And she doesn't back down to him as her husband. So I think that that's really cool, and it's a good representation of her, especially a quote unquote housewife in the 60s. But you can tell that she is really interested in the same things that her husband is interested in, and that they're a team. So I thought that was really, really cool.
I agree, and I love the fact that you're starting with the supporting cast. I think I've worn on you a little bit, or had some sort of influence on you, that you are speaking of the supporting cast first, because it is an impressive supporting cast. Without these supporting characters, the movie just wouldn't ring as true as it does, and the movie does ring true on so many different levels. But I will say this: if there was an acting god and an Academy Award god, Tracy Letts would be nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this.
Yeah.
Because that scene in the car is just amazing. It's like, come on, dude. Like, just that one scene is Academy Award nominatable, in my opinion. And, I know it's a little silly because he is a supporting character, and he's very much kind of a stock character, if you will, the very almost brutish, straightforward businessman who, but they give him texture, which is what I love about the supporting characters. They give them backgrounds. They give them development, not just the wife at home who's being supportive of her husband, which I thought was a flaw at first, that she kind of says, "Oh, you're giving this up? No, don't give it up. What are you doing? Don't give up your dreams." And then he says, "No, I got to be a man and be supportive." And then later on, she freaks out when he goes back to doing it. But that's what people do in relationships. They support, then they question, and then they go, "Wait, you said this, which is what you thought I wanted, but I didn't want you to have that. Now you're going back to it. Now I'm pissed. I wasn't pissed before." So I thought that was very interesting how it kind of flip-flops. And actually, Tracy Letts' character, Ford number 2, is, why isn't he a junior, by the way?
He's the deuce.
Yeah, he's the deuce. I thought it was interesting how he kind of understood and didn't understand, but how they go through their life being one way. And then Matt Damon has that incredible scene where he makes Tracy Letts' eyes open in a way that only a race car driver could do, in that fantastically acted scene. But yet at the end of the movie, Tracy Letts is very influenced by Josh Lucas. Is that his name? Josh Lucas. He's influenced by him, and he kind of goes with the flow, even though he should know by now to trust these two guys. He should have known by now to trust these two guys. But yet the businessman in him wants the image of the 3 cars going across the finish line, and he forgets all of that stuff that he learned. I thought that was real life. I think people act like that. You go through these not traumatic, but you go through these life-altering experiences, but you still are who you are, and you kind of fall back to that. And at first I was a little bothered by that in the screenplay, but in the end I thought, that's the way humans are.
Yeah.
So, John Bernthal, you're right. Is it Catriona? Catriona, I guess is her name. All of these actors in the supporting cast are amazing. But the point to all that is that I love the fact that we're talking about the supporting cast because this movie works on so many different levels. And it would be such a disappointment that you have a 2.5 hour long movie and you don't have supporting characters that are rich and textured. And fortunately, this movie does. And I was a little scared of this movie, not because I didn't want to see it, but it was the follow-up, the next movie to seeing Parasite. And if anybody's heard our podcast, we know that it was a love fest. And I just didn't want to experience anything in the theater right now. I just didn't want to because I was afraid it was going to take away or let me down. Fortunately, this movie is just well done. It's just extremely well done. It's one of those movies. First of all, it's PG-13, no cussing, no sex, no drugs. You don't need any of it. I went with my father. We had a blast. It was like when I was a kid. It's not like it was when I went to the movies as a kid where I lost myself for 2.5 hours and forgot I was even in the movies. And that's what this experience was. It's highly entertaining. It's extremely well acted. And I kept saying to myself on the way there, well, it's got to have something because it's Christian Bale and Matt Damon. How bad could it be? And I should have never doubted that that quality of people bring us quality films. So I was worried, but in the long run, and as a matter of fact, there is a guy on Twitter who does the next best picture. That's his name on Twitter. And he does a podcast and he's got about 5,000 followers. And I like his opinion. I like his idea of who should be nominated. Well, he just did a list of preliminary Oscar nominations. And then he had 4 or 5 people who I don't know who they are. Maybe they follow him. Maybe that's part of his podcast. I've listened to his podcast once or twice. I know that he has different people on speaking about different subjects, but he has a really good take on movies. So I value people who seem to have similar tastes, but also kind of have diverse tastes too. So I was reading stuff that he was posting about different stuff, and he posted all these preliminary Oscar predictions. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I clicked on it and I do this thing where I'm like, okay, if they nominate Awkwafina, I'm looking at their list. If they don't, I'm not looking at their list. I have like a baseline of where to go. And of course, Parasite's on all of their best pictures. On all of them was Ford versus Ferrari. And I thought, this movie is as good as I experienced. All of these people who have seemingly good taste in film love this movie and think it's going to be nominated for Best Picture. So,
well, yeah, there's a couple things there. Number one, the reason why Henry Ford is not a junior is because his dad's name was not Henry Ford. His dad was the son of Henry Ford. His dad was Edsel Ford. So he wouldn't technically be a junior because his grandpa was Henry Ford.
Got it. And I just looked up, let me tell you this really quick. I just looked up V versus versus.
Oh, yeah?
And apparently in legal terms, V is for versus in a court case.
Oh.
So Roe v. Wade, which is about the play that I just did, instead of Roe versus Wade, it's Roe v. Wade. So legally, it's V. So I guess maybe they had adopted that as a term, but VS means versus, but so does V, but usually it's in a legal term. There you go.
That's smart. Okay. All right. Well, then that gives this movie more cachet, I guess, because it's got the legal term for versus in the title. But I didn't really have a doubt that it was gonna have some sort of substance on top of just like being a racing movie, just because you've got James Mangold, like you said, you've got Matt Damon, Christian Bale, and so I thought that it would have a little bit of substance to it. And then even from the trailers, I thought you'd get a little bit more out of it. But it was interesting just talking about Tracy Letts and seeing that scene in the trailer, like a portion of the scene in the trailer where he's driven around by Carroll Shelby in the GT 350 or whatever it was. I don't know which one, a GT 40, I guess at the time. But I thought that he was crying because he was just scared. But then in the film, it takes on a different life. And means actually, it means more. I love that because there's a double-edged sword, especially for me. I don't know about other people, but when I watch a trailer, that especially going to movies fairly frequently, you see a lot of trailers a lot. You see trailers for movies multiple times, and it kind of like ingrains itself into your brain. And I start wondering when I'm going to see that particular scene in a movie, and it kind of is a separate background process if we're talking about it in computer terms. Like your computer's doing whatever it's doing right now. It's got your browser open and it's got other things open right now, but it also has a bunch of background processes going on all the time. And so part of my movie watching, especially in a movie where I've seen a trailer of it, I have these background processes running where like, when am I going to see this scene that I saw in the trailer? And so when we got to that scene in this film where Carroll Shelby's driving around the Deuce in his car, it rose above what I expected, and it changed what they did in the trailer, and that's good for me. That's always good for me, because I'm not being like, oh, that's going to be at this part of the movie and that's going to be at this part of the movie. It added to the film for me, so I thought that was great. But you're right. The supporting characters, we didn't talk about John Bernthal that much. He plays Lee Iacocca, which is great. I mean, just the scenes between him and Matt Damon specifically worked really well, and also his scenes with, I mean, he's kind of in this film, he's the representative of the Ford Motor Company to Ferrari in kind of the beginning there, and you get to see his discomfort and the whole process of what went on. Portions of this movie are historically accurate and other sections are not historically accurate, but in reading the kind of like breakdown of like what's true and what's not true, I felt like I didn't really lose anything, or didn't really feel like they were being disingenuous by changing the things that they did change in this film. It seemed to coalesce a lot better with the choices that they made. You have to have a bad guy in this film, and this movie picks a couple people. I mean, they in some ways pick Ferrari as the bad guy. I mean, obviously with the title, you could see that. But really, Ferrari's not necessarily a bad guy. They're just the big man on campus, and they don't want to be knocked off the pedestal. So that makes sense to me. But specifically, I don't want to get into too much spoilery type things, but there's a particular character that becomes the bad guy in the film fairly quickly, and they ride that to the end, and it's fine. I'm sure that person, the real person, was a more nuanced person than what is portrayed in this film, but for the sake of the film, it makes it easier and it makes it more dynamic as a film. So I don't feel like I'm all for historical accuracy, but I didn't go to the movie to watch a documentary. I went to the movie to watch an engaging narrative film about a race that seemed impossible to win with the people and resources available at the time. It seemed like it was a huge uphill battle, and I think that they represented that properly. So, did you have any issues with the historical inaccuracies, or did you read anything about it, or do you care?
No, yes, I care. Now that I've seen a great film, I will go back and look, and I will read up on it. But no, I don't know enough about this sport, and I don't know enough, and I'm from the South, so I should know much more than I do. But I don't know anything about this story. So if I was to watch a documentary and then see this film, I might feel differently about it, and I might feel differently after I watch a documentary about what actually happened. The only thing is that sometimes when you have a clear-cut antagonist and protagonist situation, which they do in this film, there's this fine line where they turn the bad guy into, the guy on the railroad tracks twisting his
mustache twirling villain.
Yeah. And it starts to teeter in that a little bit. But do we want to have a backstory to the bad guy? Do we want to know why his character's doing what he's doing? Or is what he's doing bad enough to where that's all we need to know about that person, and they are the facilitator of that action? And unfortunately, I would have liked a little bit more texture. If we're keeping the bad guy's name secret, I would have liked a little bit more texture to it, because it makes it grounds it for me. It grounds it for me. So when you have those illogical, almost over the top moments closer to the middle of the film, in particular, when the guy gets locked into the office, those kind of scenes, it teeters back and forth for me. If I know more about that character, will I feel sympathetic for him and think what the one character who is clearly the protagonist, his choice is bad because I know more things about it? Would the scene be as almost farcically funny if I didn't, or if I did know stuff about this character? Or is his actions all I need to know? they pepper it with just enough, in my opinion. And maybe I'm having like an afterglow of Parasite where I can't see bad in things, but that's my temperament when it comes to movies anyway. I always see the positive first. They kind of pepper in a few things about this guy's nature. So for me, if his nature and his actions were conflicting, then I would have a problem with it. Then I wouldn't understand what he was doing. But all we really need to know is what he puts in motion by what he chooses to do, even if he doesn't have the authority originally and then gets the authority later on, which is a tad bit confusing because of what we were talking about earlier with Tracy Letts. Why would he allow certain things to happen after he had that experience in the car with Matt Damon, or Carol is the character? It can be a little confusing, but for me, I'm going to stick with didn't bother me because it was about actions, not about character at that point.
Yeah.
But once you start to talk about this supporting cast and how beautifully etched out they are, it is a little bit of a shame that we don't have more texture to those characters. That said, there are certain supporting characters and actors who bring that anyway, without naming names. They bring it anyway, regardless of whether or not you know anything about certain characters. There's a look in their eye, and then there's kind of a smirk on their face, or there's kind of a smile at the end of the film where you knew that person was all the time with the lead protagonist the whole entire time of the film. And it's kind of like a wink wink to the audience that the character's like, I've been with you the whole entire time. I just haven't been able to really let it out. And then the filmmaker is so smart to not really etch that out, to just let it happen in a smile, happen in this like half-cocked smile that the one character has at the end of the film. So, actions speak louder than words. Yeah. And so this film is so etched out in so many different levels. I'm wondering if it would get weighed down if all of these characters were so identified. With all due respect, it's a movie about car racing. That's what we want. Mm-hmm. That's what we need. Even if we don't know that's what we wanted, like me, I didn't know what I wanted. That's what I got, and that's what I needed. If I wanted to see a play about these characters and these bad guys came on and twirled their mustaches, I'd be a little bit standoffish with it. I'd be like, why is he doing what he's doing? But when you have car racing shot the way that it's shot in this film, who gives a crap? Yeah. Because it's really cool to look at. I mean, it's really well done.
It is well done. I mean, cinematically, it's definitely well done. I mean, we can start getting into that here in a second, but I did want to bring up one more supporting actor that we haven't talked about, and it's Ray McKinnon, and he plays Phil in the film, and he's kind of like the right-hand man to Carroll Shelby in Shelby American. And he's integral in the development of the car, along with Ken Miles and Carroll Shelby, and so the first time I really noticed him was as the suitor, the gentleman suitor in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and he's bona fide, if that rings any bells. So yeah. You know what happened right after that is he won an Academy Award for a short film, The Accountant, which I did not know that. So, I mean, he wrote, directed, starred in this movie, The Accountant, and it won an Academy Award for short film. So that's awesome. So cool. But I mean, I've seen him in other films. He was in Apollo 13. He's been in a couple other films. I don't really remember him in Mud, but yeah, he was in that Matthew McConaughey film, Mud. And so he's kind of like, he's been working. He was also in Deadwood, which I do kind of remember him from Deadwood, but I only watched like the first season of Deadwood. But he's got such a distinctive look to him. And I think that just even their small scenes, especially his scene with Ken Miles' son with Noah Jupe, is really well done and kind of touching in the moment that it's at, especially what's going to come later.
First of all, he's a Sons of Anarchy alumni.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm all about that. Yeah, I'm all about that. And as for him winning the Academy Award, there's an interesting little backstory to that, because the woman that he won it with was his girlfriend/wife at the time. I believe they were just boyfriend, girlfriend at the time, but I'm not sure. And her name is Lisa Blunt, I believe is her name. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I just lost it. Is that her name? Mm-hmm. Yeah. She unfortunately passed away from really severe cancer about 10 years later. So I know somebody who worked with him, And that's how Walter Goggins got into the picture with the accountant.
Oh,
And
Walton
then they
Goggins,
kind of, they're Sons of Anarchy. Yeah, they're Sons of Anarchy alumni too. And it's interesting to me, and Deadwood, it's interesting to me, and a lot of characters on Deadwood made it on the Sons of Anarchy. It's interesting to me that these actors are on these shows that we are attracted to and that somehow we cling on to. And then we go, oh, that's Ray McKinnon. Oh, that's Walter Goggins. Oh, that's who all these people are. And they've been working together for decades. And it's a really nice ode to his wife who passed away, that they won the Oscar together. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2010. I think The Accountant is 2001, and she had been sick for a while. So it's nice to know that they had a chance. And you would recognize her too. Do you ever see Officer and the Gentleman?
Yeah, a long time ago though.
Do you happen to remember Deborah Winger's best friend?
Yes, I'm looking at a picture of her right now. Yes, I do remember
That's her. Yeah, that's her. So she's been in quite a few things and had a nice little career for a while there. So it's nice that these people had a chance to be together, win an Oscar. And I've never seen The Accountant. It's been recommended to me by a variety of amount of people, especially being Sons of Anarchy fans and Ray McKinnon. And he's also in The Blind Side, which he's a standout in that too. You know, in a film that doesn't have many standouts other than Sandra Bullock, it's kind of hard to like notice people sometimes. And he's a standout in that. He plays something different in each movie that he's in. He is crazy great in Sons of Anarchy. You should see that season just for him. Like, you're never sure what that guy's going to do. And then, you know, Deadwood. And then, you know, he plays a coach in The Blind Side, and then he plays a race car aficionado in this. And you're right. That scene between him and Noah Jupe, I think, is the best scene in Ford versus Ferrari. It's just all of the things that are not said, but said. And it's so nice. First of all, I have to say this. I forgot to say this. It's so nice that a movie is not about a father-son conflict. It's a movie with a healthy relationship between a father and son. Woohoo! And what is this? The 10%, you know, the 10% other than the 90%. But it's nice to see an adult in a movie speak to a child the way the child needs to hear it, instead of speaking down or speaking to a child the way that they think the child should hear it. He shoots from the hip in that scene, and it's just masterful how much is not said. So I wanted to interject that because, you know, shout out to Sons of Anarchy and people who've been in it, because it just they keep filtering off into all of these branches that I keep going, oh, yep, that's so-and-so from Sons of Anarchy. That's so-and-so from Breaking Bad. That's so-and-so from Deadwood. And it's amazing to me. So when I saw Ray McKinnon, I was like, oh, we're in good shape. Whatever's happening in the background, we're going to be just fine, because this guy always brings it. So there you go.
Well, and also Christian Bale and Matt Damon are in the movie. So we're done talking about actors. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, those slackers. Let's not talk about them. You know, we don't need to talk about those guys. Who needs those guys?
Well, you can kind of expect a certain amount of professionalism and quality from each of those actors.
I want to sidestep for just Lisa Blunt, according to IMDb, died of a blood disorder. I don't want to say she died of cancer without being knowledgeable of that. That's a story that I heard from somebody else. I might be wrong about that, but I just wanted, out of respect for this person and her bio, that's what it says on IMDb. Very talented lady. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that, because I don't want to set something in motion when people hear it and they're like, oh yeah, not that it would, but it's just something that would bother me if I didn't make a side note to that.
It looked like Christian Bale lost some weight for this film again. I saw something going across the film blogs and all that stuff that he said he's not going to do that anymore. So good for him. He shouldn't.
He's been saying that for 15 years.
Well, he shouldn't be doing it anyway. It's dumb. I mean, I really, seeing pictures of Ken Miles, he was, he wasn't emaciated or anything, but he was a very skinny British dude. So I understand why Christian Bale moved towards that, but he would have been fine if Matt Damon doesn't look exactly like Carroll Shelby. So it's not like he's going to do anything to really, change his face or anything to match Carroll Shelby. I mean, maybe change his hair or something, but that's it.
Let me speak to that really quick, because this happens to me, and actually it's happened reverse to me. I had a director tell me, and I think we've talked about this before, you need more of a dad bod. And I was like, do I have a dad bod? Like, no. And I was like, do I say that? Like, and he was trying to tell me to not try to work out. He wanted a middle-aged, flabby dad bod guy. And I was like, okay. So then the last play that I was in, the guy was thick, and I was already in middle-aged dad bod mode anyway. And I was told if I could gain some weight, not told, but you know, they referred to the guy being much thicker than me. It's an interesting phenomenon, which is the reverse of what we're talking about with Christian Bale. And I've felt this way also about being thinner for a role. Regardless of how you look compared to the character, there's something about having their physical prowess that allows you to understand something better. And luckily, people said I was in too good of shape for the last character, so I was all about that. But I'm thick because of it. So I understand why Christian Bale would do what he does. Now, he lost 70 pounds in 7 months going from Vice to this. That's a bit extreme, but at the same time, I understand it. If you're 30 pounds heavier than a character, something about that influences who you are and how you approach something. So I understand what you're saying. You don't look like the character, but there's something about the physical aspects of it that if you are heavier or lighter than the character, something about allowing yourself to go there helps you. It just does. It just does.
I understand that Christian Bale, the day that he rapped on Vice, wouldn't have been able to even fit himself into that GT40 or whatever. Yeah, the GT40 that he was supposed to be driving in Ford versus Ferrari. So I get it. Yeah, get back down to your normal weight as a healthy human being, but you don't have to. I mean, he did look like he was. I mean, he didn't look machinist thin, but he looked skinny. He looked almost fighter. The fighter thin. So it was you could definitely tell that he lost more weight than he had to. But I guess I just feel like it's not. Do you feel like, I guess maybe since you're an actor, you feel like it's worth it for an actor to put their body through something like that, even if it's detrimental to their health in the long run, to be able to act more like the character that they're portraying?
Yes.
Okay. See, all right. Well, that's
yes,
the difference.
But see, okay, people every day of their life do things that are not good for them because of alternative reasons. People smoke, people drink, people do drugs. I'm not equivalating something like losing weight rapidly for a part as the same as doing crack or anything, but I'm saying that people do things bad for themselves every day in vain with no purpose other than trying to fill that God-shaped hole that we're always talking about, which I understand that too, because I'm trying to fill that up daily. But for me, there's something about the way your body feels when you look at a picture of somebody you're playing. And actually the last play that I was in was the first time I've ever played anybody who's exists in real life and actually still does exist. And then when I saw pictures, I was like, oh, well, I'm not gaining that weight. No way.
Yeah.
But I also was very secure with wearing a 1980s polo shirt tucked into my pants at my Jesus camp scene, where I was like, oh my God, every part of my fat boy image is driving me crazy now. But yet that's how the guy looked. And when I saw how I looked in a picture versus how I felt, I went, nobody is going to look this guy up and think Paul didn't come close enough, because people looked him up and came to me and said, they were nice about it. Well, you're much better looking than this guy, or yeah, he's much thicker than you are. And I'm like, yep. And they're like, you might not want to hit the weights anymore. You might want to stop on weightlifting. And I was like, well, okay, well, that fooled you. But there is something about it. So when I saw this picture, my niece came and saw the play, and she took a couple of pictures stealthily, and I saw him and I thought, you know what, if somebody was to see that picture and the real life picture, they would think I was playing that guy. if they were, if somebody said, here's 10 people he's possibly playing, who could it be? They would go to that guy. And so for me, that's important because that transposes to the audience that Jesus Camp look is important because that's what he thought looked good at the time. So it's important. And I'm telling you, it physically makes you feel different. It just does. I don't know if you remember in that play I did in North Carolina, Perfect Arrangement, there was a scene where I was in overalls and I was supposed to be painting my kitchen. Well, I remember when they came to me with those overalls, I was like, those are skinny people overalls. I can't. And I was bound and determined to lose weight and be in a better shape for that play anyway. Plus the nerves of it all probably made me lose some weight too. But I was like, I can't wear that. Look at that waist. That's for skinny people. And miraculously, I lost that weight and I fit into that. And the problem with that was not a vanity thing. It was a technical thing because I had to get in and out of that very quickly after that one scene. And it was very difficult getting it on and off at first because it just was uncomfortable. But I was bound and determined and I lost that weight and I got into it. And now I look at that picture and I'm like, look how skinny I look. That and the fact that I remember it altered the way that I felt during that scene. It made me feel differently wearing those overalls. I guess I've just never worn them like that before. I've never been in a position where I've had to paint a whole house in more full overalls. I just never have. So it made me feel different. It made me feel like the man of the house. It made me feel like I'm taking care of my family. I'm painting the house because this is my response. It made me feel different. And every time I zipped it up and I fit into it and I fit into it well, it just made you feel differently. So I'm not saying that any of us should go out and lose a bunch of weight because they're in a play and do it in a bad way, but I understand why people do it. And I think 70 pounds in 7 months is not good when you're in your 40s. You probably have a stroke, it's like crazy. But I have a feeling that he has a method to his madness that allows him to do other things. When I was trying to lose the weight for that one play, I wasn't just going to not eat. I was going to eat steamed broccoli and chicken, baked chicken with no skin. And then I was drinking a fresh fruit juice thing that I did myself every day. So nutritionally wise, I was actually better off than I was in my normal finger quote life. So maybe Christian Bale has some kind of technique where he takes herbal supplements that help him out, or he has a certain vitamin, or he has a homeopathic practitioner who helps him, or a doctor who helps him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure he's got all of those things.
Wouldn't you? I mean, I would. So for me, it didn't matter in this that he was skinny, but didn't matter that he was fat or overweight in Vice. It mattered. Like he couldn't play that part being as thin as he is now. He couldn't. And he couldn't play Batman being as thin as he was in The Machinist or The Fighter. He couldn't do it. He had to. See, I think that's crazier. When you're somebody like Edward Norton or Jake Gyllenhaal or Christian Bale, who go from being just normal skinny guy to being buffed out for a boxing movie or American History X or, speaking of Sons of Anarchy again. So that was a long-winded answer to I get it.
That's the difference between me and you. It just doesn't make sense to me. But here's the good thing about the cinematography and the CGI and all of the technical side of this film. I didn't notice it. So I don't know where the line is between CGI and practical shooting of the cars. And that says a lot. It's becoming more, for me at least, it's becoming more of like the rule as opposed to the exception that this is happening. So I don't know if it's that the CGI is getting to the point where it's becoming so much more seamless that it's not as expensive. Because it used to be that only the huge big budget movies would get kind of seamless CGI, and the lesser known or the smaller lower budget movies suffer from obvious technological limitations, and you can kind of pick apart the tougher scenes. But in this film, I mean, I'm constantly on the lookout for things that don't look right, and I really didn't notice it. Now, I'm starting to wonder if some of that is the inherent action of a racing movie. Maybe that helps to kind of cover over those smaller sins of bad CGI or what. I don't really know. And also the cutting. I don't know if you noticed the editing, but it was a lot slower than a movie like Fast and the Furious would be. The amount of cuts per section of race footage, or when they're in a race, whether it's they did the Sebring race, they did the Le Mans twice, so there were multiple, and then they did Daytona. So there's like multiple races that they're kind of going through, and the cutting. I mean, yes, you had shots of Ken Miles' foot pushing the accelerator. You had a close-up shot of him shifting. You had certain shots like the interstitial shots like that. But really, a lot of the shots were longer. At least they felt longer, and not as kind of like MTV cut. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but it used to be there's so many cuts in these, whatever it is, music videos or these crazy films, and they just keep cutting so quickly. I didn't get that feeling from this film, even though it's kind of right in the wheelhouse. You would think that it would be rife with quick cuts and to try to manufacture action, but a lot of the racing scenes in this film weren't necessarily like trying to manufacture action. They were just trying to represent the action, whether it's Ken Miles can't get his door closed, or his interactions with the Italian driver in Le Mans and the second Le Mans race. I mean, it just seems like those have built-in stakes, and those are things that you don't need to really gussy up too much.
I think it's going to be that film that if it's nominated for Best Picture, it's going to be nominated for every technical award, and it's going to be the one that wins all of the technical awards, and people are going to be like, wait, what? We just thought that was like the 9th nomination. We just thought because Matt Damon and Christian Bale were in it. It is a phenomenon how great this film looks, how great it sounds, sound mixing, sound editing,
amazing.
all that stuff that I was taking a little celebration that you mentioned the acting first, sporting acting first. And I'm going to celebrate in the fact that I think I notice more things like that now because of having you in my life and celebrating films the way that we do, because I always kind of understood it, but it doesn't stick out to me. And when it does stick out to me, it's more of a nuisance than it's more of a detriment to the film when I notice the editing or whatever. But the sound mixing is unbelievable. You can hear the squeaking and the metal of the other cars. It's crazy. It's these small, tiny details that are right there on the surface that you don't have to search for, but they're there and they influence how you're watching something. And the way that the stick shift changes gear sounds differently in a car next to you than it does when you're inside the car. And to even worry about that for 7 other cars is amazing to me. Like, I noticed the door shutting when they first took their positions and they had to run to their cars, and then Christian Bale. And I think that, of course, that's done on purpose because Christian Bale's door does not shut right. And you hear all of the other cars. It's not done that obvious. So I was like, wow, that's really brilliant. And for it to not take me out of the film, but to keep me in it and keep me entrenched in it because of stuff like that, I love it. So I think it's going to be sound mixing, sound editing, film editing, cinematography, special effects, all of those things. And I think it's going to be brilliant when they show, how they show like the green screen and then they show the shot.
Oh, yeah.
What's real and what's not real. Because I was convinced, and I'd like to do more research on this, that it looked like what they did was take some stock footage and amp it up to look more not old looking. No, it's all CGI. You're shaking your head no.
There's ways you can add grain. You can add grain to make it look like it was shot with a camera in the 70s.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we've talked about that before. You've pointed that out a couple times before, but it kind of looked like they took this stock image and then superimposed CGI effects on top of it to make it look less 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and more like it was happening right in front of you, and then superimposed, or however you want to say it, the cars and the people and all the other stuff. And I thought, Well, that is probably a really good way to do it because you're amping up what is already there versus, so you're saying all of those, that one shot where they race to their cars, they actually run to their cars, all of that is CGI. All of those.
No, they were probably on a in a racetrack, and they may have even built the little pit areas. There are a couple of the pit areas, but then they probably extended it with CGI. I'm guessing they didn't. I'm guessing they were trying to make the Le Mans, start finish area as period specific as possible. But I'm sure that they weren't at. Well, I'm not sure. I'm guessing that they weren't at that exact place. But it'd be interesting to see if they did, gin up the whole thing. But I'm guessing they had a little bit of space to actually drive the vehicles properly, and they obviously needed the space to be able to like pull into the pit area and then pull out of the pit area. There's no reason to CGI all that. You need to be able to interact with the cars and with all those things. But talking about the sound design and sound editing, one perfect example that kind of stuck out to me, and not in a bad way but in a good way, was that when Carroll Shelby goes to visit. Okay, we're going to talk about spoilers, so spoilers from now on. I have to spoil a portion of the film. Okay, so spoilers from now on, Ford versus Ferrari, go see it. Okay, so when Carroll Shelby goes to the house after Ken Miles dies, and he ends up talking with Ken's son, and then he sees Ken's wife and doesn't end up going to visit her. He gets back in his car, which is a Shelby Cobra car that he designed, and you could tell he's just completely distraught, and he takes his nitroglycerin pills and chews on them, and then he turns on his car, and you can see a demeanor change in him, and it is based on the sound of his car. Him turning on his car, he's totally out of his element, and then he turns on his car, and he becomes comfortable and gets back into his element, and it's based on just his ability to sit in the car and turn it on and understand and feel that comfort that he's created for himself, but it is also a comfort to him. So it's so well done. And then of course he peels out and almost gets into 5 wrecks in the span of a block, but that's just par for the course for him, I guess. So yeah, that's a really well done, and it makes you feel like if you were listening to it with the sound off, or for people who are hearing impaired, like that's a portion of the film that it's hard to translate without that sound, without the sound element to film, and it's got to be difficult to get a full feeling of a film by just interacting with it visually, or by just interacting with it orally.
Well, luckily closed captions do the sound effects.
You're right.
They will put in sound effects that are important. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're doing those, I don't know what they're called, but when people narrate the film, they don't narrate it.
Yeah,
it's like closed caption, yes, but it's
dialogue.
It's like,
no,
boy
not dialogue.
walks into the room. The room is blue.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what it's called.
We have to do it. It's audio description. So Fox has a bunch of shows that have audio description, and yeah, you're right. Like you said, it is they're saying like he opens the door and walks towards the table, like, and it does. You're right. It does add to what you're hearing, and they do it very artfully so that it's not stepping on any kind of dialogue. So it's very well done, and you're right. I think that is a benefit to seeing a show or a film with that, and that's fairly readily available, especially with larger movies and television shows. So that's great.
There's a moment in a film where I go, this is why this actor chose to do this movie. That moment right there is why Matt Damon chose to do this movie for me. I'm not saying that he chose to do it for me. That's what it sounded like. What I mean is there's always a moment in a script that I go, this must be the reason why somebody attached himself to it, because that moment is brilliant. It brings me to a point, since we're now into spoilers, and I definitely say to people, see this film in the theater. It is just spectacular on the big screen. This is one of those ones that I hope most people see on the big screen. It's like The Life of Pi. I've recommended that to everybody to see on the big screen because it just was beautiful to look at. And this film is beautiful to look at in a different way, but still just really, it's an interesting ride. I don't want to use a pun, but that's the truth. The amazing part about the screenplay and this moment is right before it when he's talking to his son. Here's where this movie could have very easily teetered into cliche and stereotype, and then I would have been like rolling my eyes and been like, this is the film I thought this was going to be, instead of what it turned into be. It's a film about what's not being said as much as it's about a film about what's being said. We talked about that scene early on with Ray McKinnon and the son, Peter Miles, how that's all about what's not said and how what he says is the right thing to say. So at the end, when Matt Damon is talking about it, when Carol is talking about to Pete or Peter, instead of going, he died doing what he loved, which is what most movies would do, he doesn't do that. He allows, actually the son helps him. The son helps him be resolved over the fact that it's as much his dad's responsibility for doing the job that he did as it is for Carol's responsibility for bringing him into this life, even though this is his life. But instead of doing that, the movie doesn't do that. It does the opposite. It allows the strong person to be the young person and the older person to say, hey, I can learn a lesson wherever I've got. And then that cathartic moment that Matt Damon has, and you're right, he takes those pills, which doesn't help. He looks over at the house one more time. It doesn't help. That scene when he waves, oh my God, it's so touching. It's killing me now. It didn't kill me in the theater, but it's killing me now. Although I did tear up a couple of times, but I'm a crier. When he waves to her and she waves back, and the way that, no, she waves to him and then he waves back. Yeah. The way he waves back is so telling of who he is as a character. It's like, that's why you get paid the big bucks, Matt. That's why you have 3 Oscar nominations and a win. That's why, right there. And you're absolutely right. Until that key, the pills don't do it. The cathartic moment don't do it. The keys don't do it. And the keys jingle in a way that you know he's putting them into the ignition. The ignition turn doesn't do it, but that, it settles him.
Yep.
And that right there, you could watch that moment and know what this movie was. It's just brilliant. It's when screenplay meets great acting, meets great directing, meets great audience participation, if you will, for lack of a better term. So yeah, that was the moment, because I wouldn't give myself over to this movie for 2.5 hours. I was like, nope, this isn't what I think it is. Nope, this isn't as good as I thought it was. Yeah, this was really good, Paul. Give yourself over. Give yourself over. Nope, not going to do it. And I turned to my dad and I said, if he's dead, I'll hate this movie. I'm going to hate this movie if he's dead. So I obviously was way more attached to it than I was admitting to myself. And then the wave happened. I went, nope. Yep, this movie is everything it was supposed to be, and I am embarrassed that I did not give myself over to it from moment one. And I am happy to admit I was completely wrong. It is one of the best movies of the year. It really, really is. It sounds so like trivial to classify something like that, but for me and you, I think it's okay to say that between us, even though we're recording it and people listen. I think it's okay to say that because it means something to you and I to say that about a movie. It means that this movie has touched us in a way than just everything else that we've seen this year. So for me, regardless of the nominations, I feel completely fulfilled having seen this movie. I really have. And it was nice to go to a movie where, after Parasite, everything is off base. Just everything is off kiltered in a good way. It's just off kiltered. I feel like I was 12 years old again, and I discovered a movie that I didn't know anything about. And I'm sitting on Saturday afternoon at a matinee where my parents dropped us off when they had those kiddie matinees when I was a child. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching something that has transfixed everybody unexpectedly. And that's exactly what happened to me in this film. It's just bravo. Yeah. I mean, bravo. Yeah. It's really well done.
Yeah. It's a good come down from Parasite, and it's not even close. It's a totally different feel for a movie. I mean, it's like you said earlier, It is
Thank
technically
God.
a sports movie. It's a PG-13 movie. It has kind of a more strict narrative. I mean, it's called Ford versus Ferrari. You already have two opposing forces. You already have a protagonist. You already have a narrative built in to the film. So it's much easier to ease into this film than it would be to ease into a film similar to Parasite. We brought up Us, or I brought up Us last week in our Parasite discussion. A movie like The Farewell, even, I think it would be difficult to see The Farewell right after seeing Parasite, because The Farewell is a great movie, and it hit me hard when I watched it, but it's hard to put things up against a movie like I couldn't imagine people, because a lot of people saw Parasite at Toronto International Film Festival, and they saw it like whatever the third movie they saw that day, and they're seeing whatever 15 movies in a weekend, and there's too much stuff to process in that film to shove it in between three other films.
I would have quit. I was been like, here's my press pass. This is how much this movie has affected me. I'm done. I mean, regardless of what. Yeah, I think you're right. Now, we did watch The Lighthouse, and then Lost Weekend, and then Parasite. So we're kind of on some kind of interesting level right then and there. But there's enough time between Lighthouse, then our recording of The Lost Weekend, and then Parasite. So there's, weeks in between all of that. Can you imagine seeing Midsommar, Parasite, and then The Lighthouse? Like, forget it. I need Ford versus Ferrari cannot be considered a palate cleanser for me, because it's way more spectacular than that. It's just well done, but that's what it's become because of Parasite. That said, this movie stands on its own. Yeah. I was happy to see it in the theater. It's loud, it's boisterous, it's over the top in places, and I'm talking about the car racing scenes, but it's grounded and well done. It's a human story that's told in this even tone. They don't make any kind of crazy, artsy, spectacular movements. It doesn't need it. But what they chose to do was smartly done. They left out anything that you would have expected this film to be, and they made it something that you weren't expecting it to be. And by you, I mean me. So it's not a palate cleanser, but I am glad that this is the first movie I saw after Parasite, because I couldn't have handled anything that was subpar, and I couldn't I'm sound a little snotty there, but I'm saying that if I had seen, I can't even give you an example because I don't want to put anything down, but I can't imagine seeing something that did not fulfill a need in me like Ford versus Ferrari. Even though I didn't know I was fulfilling a need, it fulfilled that need of being that 12-year-old watching those movies that completely, I forgot I was in the theater for 2.5 hours. And this movie's 2.5 hours. That's a long running time, but it never felt that. At all. It didn't. Never felt that way at all.
It didn't feel like that to me.
I can go another half an hour, James Mangold. I can go another half an hour. If you want to bring them back, I'm good. I can go another half an hour, because it just was easy to watch this film, because it's just everything. All of the boxes that it ticks are they're not boxes you're expecting, but they're the boxes you needed to see. If you had told, and I hate to reference it again, but I'm going to, I don't hate to, I just don't want to be that person who is always referencing something and can't come out of it. But
Parasite,
if you have seen Parasite, then you can excuse it, because you will know what I'm talking about. I wouldn't have wanted to know anything about that movie going into it. I'm grateful I did not know anything going into that. And I would respect that all the way down the line of not knowing. So much so that we told people to turn the podcast off last week if you haven't seen it. This is not the type of film that if you know everything about it, it's going to spoil it. Yeah. It's not going to spoil Ford versus Ferrari. It's still going to be human. It's still going to have those moments. I could spend 2 hours describing how Tracy Letts. By the way, Tracy Letts is the guy who wrote August Osage County. Yeah,
that's why I said, playwright Tracy Letts.
Tony Award winner.
Tracy Letts.
Yeah, like what? That's a crazy great play, and it's a crazy great movie. And you think when you look at somebody, something about them, but No, I had no idea that was in him.
Well, it's like Sam Shepard. I didn't know Sam Shepard was a playwright until like he was old
See,
and, you know,
yeah.
an actor I'd seen in a bunch of stuff.
We've talked about this. Of course, I do.
Yeah.
He has four Pulitzers.
Jeez.
Four of them, and like 3 of them are back to back. So what? I mean, come on, that's just crazy. But anyway, I don't feel like I could spend 2 hours describing the scene with Tracy Letts and Matt Damon in the car, and it would ruin anything because you could not verbally describe the way this movie makes you feel.
Yeah.
So for me, I say see it on the big screen, regardless of spoilers that you might have heard in this podcast, because it is just spectacular. A car door is more than just a car door, and you have to see it large because it just, I'm not saying that you're going to not love it if you've seen it on your computer or on your phone. That's fine. You can kind of go with whatever medium you're looking at it. But for me, this, I would have been, you don't know the difference because you didn't see it on the big screen, but something would have kind of etched in my mind that I should have seen it. So I'm promoting the fact that people should see it in the theater.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. Go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.